discussing the 14th principle, which has to do with property rights and the correlation between the right to life and the right to liberty. First of all, I want to ask a concept here, ask a question about a concept, and that's English common law. We've heretofore used a very simple term to express English common law. What is it? People's law. That's correct. Why is that people's law? Because it's really a law which is what to all the people? It's common, right? In other words, reasonable people who have a sense of justice can get together and make decisions that really are pretty good. Now remember the other kind of law we talked about? Ruler's law. The technical term for ruler's law is Roman civil law, where the ruler makes the law, usually a law for about everything. That's Roman civil law. A lot of things are written down in the codes. You don't find that in English common law. English common law is law which is reasonable. You have a few things written down, and if you need to make decisions beyond that, you get a group of people together, and with their common sense and reasonableness, you can come up with the way things should be. Do you understand that? Why do we call it English common law? Because if you go back to ancient Israel, where common law really had its roots, you can actually trace through world history the thread of common law, this reasonableness which is common to people. And even though most of the world has been under ruler's law, you can still see threads of common law. And it was allowed to begin to flower where? Well, before America, in England. And we'll study this in more detail when we get to the Anglo-Saxon discussion. But when the founders came along and great English philosophers and jurists like John Locke and William Blackstone and so forth, they referred to this opening, this expansion of understanding of common law to English common law. Does everybody understand that? So that's why we call that what we do. Well, here's a concept in English common law that's kind of interesting. All the land and all of the Creator's creations belongs to whom? It really belongs to the Creator, but what has He done with it? He has given it to His creations. For example, if you look on the first page of the 14th principle, that's page number 169, you'll see there a quote from Psalms, which reflects this idea, which says, "Even the heavens are the Lord's, but the earth hath He given to the children of men." Right? So it's important to understand that under English common law, the whole concept of nature was given to the children that were created. And this is reflective in John Locke's writings, where he says that the Creator, or God, gave the world, the land, its products, to His children. And furthermore, he said, He gave something else. And we studied this when we studied Cicero. What else did He give to man? What else did the Creator bestow upon man? What is it? Power to reason. And John Locke comes along and says, along with Cicero, if the Creator gave land and all the creations to His children, it would be a natural thing for Him to give the ability to take care of those things to His children, which we call what? The ability to reason and think things through. Remember us reading about that? Okay. So, man has the gift of reason to make the best use of the things which the Creator has given to us. Now there's a couple of words actually that you read in the first chapter of Genesis that have to do with the Creator's giving all of these things that He's created to man. And then He gives man a command to do what with it? With the earth, with the trees, with the fruit, with the animals. What does He say? Take care of it. There's a couple more words I want here. In taking care of it, actually subdue and have dominion over. Remember those words? To subdue it and have dominion over it. In other words, He gave to man his creations so that they will be for the use of man. And the words that He used, subdue and have dominion. Well, let me ask you this question. What does the word dominion mean? If you have dominion over something, what do you do with it? You what? Okay, at least you control it, don't you? If you have dominion over it, you have control over it. Well, in order to have control over something, you must have a certain what? There's a word that you had in your homework. You must have a certain what over it. Can you control something if I control the same thing? No. So if you're going to really have the power to control it, then you must have what? You must have a right to it. What's the word I'm looking for? You must have exclusiveness. Right? It must be yours to control. And that exclusiveness we call what? An exclusive right to it we call ownership. Right? Ownership. Exclusive control. Otherwise, if you didn't have the ability to have that exclusive control, could you, I ask, fulfill the command to subdue and have dominion over? You couldn't, really. Just, well, I'll give you a couple examples in a minute. So the concept is property rights or ownership is necessary to fulfill these dictates, to subdue and have dominion over. What would happen if you didn't have property rights? Can you think that through with me? Let's say that everybody thought they owned everything and everything belonged to everybody. People would be what? Yeah. You would really never be secure anywhere, right? And without property rights, just when an improvement is done, some covetous neighbor would come and say, "Ooh, I'd like that." I mean, any of you grow, let's say, tomatoes? You grow tomatoes? Now, I don't know about you guys, but tomatoes, it's got to be vine ripened, right? You know the difference between a vine ripened tomato and a tomato that is picked green and sprayed or whatever they do to it and make it turn red. So you plant a tomato plant, it grows, and there's a few of these luscious looking tomatoes are going to be luscious looking. And you know that tomorrow that tomato is going to be just right for you to pluck. You get up the next morning and you go out to pluck your tomato, vine ripened, and what's happened? It's gone. Somebody else had their eye on it, and they come and got it. And they would do that unless what? Unless they understood the idea of property rights and ownership, and unless that were enforced. You keep your hands off of my property. Okay? So without property rights, you know what else would happen? Well, let's go through this. Without property rights, it really would destroy an incentive to work. Do you believe that? What would be your question? Why work when, okay, when I can take somebody else's work, or if somebody is going to come take something that I just worked for, then why work? Why grow food? Except for one thing. What would happen? Nobody grew any food because as soon as they did, somebody would take it. What would take over? Hunger. And according to Cicero, you remember that little phrase he talks about natural law? It summons to duty by its commands. Well, your stomach is going to start commanding you to do something. So what are you going to do? You're going to go out and plant something to grow so it has something to eat. What's your neighbor going to do? He's going to plant something. Everybody's going to be planting things. And then what are you going to do once it gets up and about ripe? You're going to make sure that you stay out there and sleep out there. And as soon as it's ripe, what are you going to do? You're going to pluck it and what? Eat it. Hopefully you got something else growing next to it. Right? In other words, folks, unless there's enforced property rights, our whole society would basically be reduced to what? Anarchy and what we call a hand-to-mouth subsistence. You plant it, you raise it, you pluck it, you eat it. You plant it, you raise it, you pluck it, you eat it. You can't go to school, you can't go anywhere. You just, whatever you can grow, you can eat. And society does not raise itself to any higher level unless property rights are protected. You understand that? So you're deprived the fruits of your labor, or you could be. Marauding bands would be out there around just looking for anything that looks valuable. And as we said, societies, and you can show this, societies who do not protect property rights do not rise above a bare subsistence level for the very reason we've talked about. So what does that mean property is really? You have something that you want to develop. You have put into that what? Can you think that through with me? Property becomes an extension of what? Of you, of what you are. Right? And the development of your property becomes really an extension of your labor, your creativity, your energy to do it. You believe that? So property is an extension of life. Now let me ask you this question. What does your bedroom look like at home right now? Ooh. Huh? Well, we had a long weekend, so it kind of gives you time to, you know. I ask you, is your bedroom a proper reflection of you right now? It isn't? You don't think it is? I submit to you that your bedroom is a reflection of you. It may not be what you want, but it is a reflection of you. Let me ask you this question. Are your grades at school here a reflection of you? They are. See, that's where the rubber hits the road. What is real? Not what you dream about. What is real? The energy you put into something, the labor you put into something, the creativity and all of that. Wherever it is right now. Right? You have savings accounts? Does your savings account reflect you? Huh? Yeah. It has as much in it as you really want. Because if you really wanted something else, that would reflect that. Anyway, kind of interesting to think about that. My property, everything I have, is a reflection of me. How I take care of it. We had a student here. Well, he's not here now, but he used to be a couple of years ago. He would carry around a big notebook like this. It was about that thick, but the rings were only that big around. He stuffed every single paper in there, didn't even put it in the, in the holes in the rings. He just stuffed it in, and he would just carry it around. And I thought to myself, because I knew how he was, I thought, that is a reflection of him. And one day he dropped it. And it was all over everything. But it was just kind of a reflection of how he was. Anyway, so we say property really is the result of life, energy, and ingenuity. So let me ask you this question. If somebody's property is an extension of themselves, if their property is violated, stolen, attacked, destroyed, or whatever, what can you really say? Then their very life is being violated. An attack on somebody's property is really an attack on that person himself. You ever thought of that? So, all this is John Locke. This is incredible thinking here. To destroy property is an attack on life itself because somebody has put energy into that property. Here's what's this? Picture of a farm, right? Kind of, what does that reflect? What does a farm reflect? I was raised on a farm. Any of you raised on a farm? Kind of a farm, okay. Was it very orderly and neat? And my dad was always very neat. Everything, you could not find a person to make a straighter row with a tractor, even if the row was 1/4 of a mile long, than my dad. I mean, it was straight. And he kind of prided himself on that. And we saw farms that were kind of, but you look at a farm and you can kind of tell something about a person, can't you? He has put energy into cultivating, are we here? Cultivating a farm. That's how some people put their energy. What else do we have here? What's this guy doing? He's out hunting. Some people put a lot of energy. Who's hunting? Who's a hunter here? Any of you hunt? Do you? Okay, what do you hunt for? Deer, elk, okay. You put a lot of energy into that, right? And that could be how you eat. Most of us don't just eat exclusively what we hunt anymore, but sure makes nice once in a while. This is energy putting into something. Look at this one. What's this guy doing? This is a sculpture, or an artist, or a painter, putting their whole energy, their whole creativity into this. Carving a statue. And that statue becomes part of, or an extension of his life, his thinking, his abilities. Okay? I think we have one more here. Or you may just, have you noticed these first three were not really working for a wage? But you may have a job where you work for a wage, and that's okay. You're putting your creativity, your labor, and so forth into that. Earning wages, however you choose to do it. Now let's return to this word ownership for just a minute. Let me ask you a question. At what point is ownership acquired? You say you own something. How did you get it? At what point can you say, I own this? Okay, let's turn to page 171 and read a little bit of John Locke here. This is beautiful reasoning. See if you agree with this. He says, though the earth and all inferior creatures be common as the gift from God to all men, yet every man has property in his own person. What does that mean? Your own person belongs to You, right? This nobody has any right to but himself. Nobody has a right to control you. Nobody has a right to enslave you. You have a right to yourself. The labor of his body and the work of his hands, we might say, are properly his. Whatsoever then he removes out of the state of nature that nature has provided, and left it in, he hath mixed his labor with it, and joined to it something that is his own, and thereby makes it his property. I ask you, at what point is ownership acquired? When you put your what? Labor and energy into something originally that was where? In a state of nature. Do you agree with that? All right, let's go on. And by the same token, Tim mentioned when you bought it. Okay. You put your energy into acquiring something that somebody else had already had. You bought it from them. But you go clear back to a state of nature with everything, right? Let's keep reading. He says, he that is nourished by the acorns he picked up under an oak, or the apples he gathered from the trees in the wood, has certainly appropriated them to himself. Nobody can deny, but the nourishment is his. I ask then, when did they begin to be his? When he digested? Or when he ate? Or when he boiled? Or when he brought them home? Or when he picked them up? What would you say? And it is plain if the first gathering, in other words, picking them up, made them not his, nothing else could. So if I ask you the question, at what point does ownership begin? What do you say? As soon as you put labor into something in a state of nature, at the first gathering, it becomes yours. Isn't that interesting? Is this basic or what? So, let's put this up here. At the first gathering from nature, John Locke says. Now, this next paragraph of his on page 172 is an interesting refuting of the communist philosophy. What do communists say about property rights? There is no such thing. Everybody owns everything. I want to teach you how John Locke would refute that argument, and it's so simple. Here's what he says, middle of the page. He says, that labor added something to them, the acorns or the apples, more than nature, the common mother of all, had done, and so they become his private right. And will anyone say he had no right to those acorns or apples he thus appropriated, because he had not the consent of all mankind to make them his? What if they belonged to everybody? If you wanted to eat an apple, say you were hungry and you wanted to eat an apple, who would you have to ask? Everyone. And what would happen before you did?
Probably die before you did it.
You would die of hunger. That would be nearly impossible to ask everyone. I mean, if you're honest, that's what you would have to do, right? Isn't that what he says here? If such a consent as that was necessary, the man would have starved, notwithstanding the plenty God had given him. It is the taking any part of what is common and removing it out of the state nature leaves it in, which begins the property without the common gift from God is of no use. Without which the common gift of God is of no use. What do you think? Kind of an interesting reasoning. So, what if we own it all in common, as the communists would say? We would need the consent of every person to eat it. So that's really a fallacious argument, isn't it? What is sacred? Property or the right to property? Look, I got some property right here. This is a nice looking pen, isn't it? What's sacred about this pen? Is it sacred in and of itself? Not really. It's just a pen. What's sacred, though, and protected about this pen? What is it? The fact that it's mine and I have a right to it. Right? And if somebody takes it from me, they're stealing. As simple and as cheap as a pen may be, it's not the pen that's sacred. It's the right to that. Isn't that interesting? So, it's the right to property that is sacred. It's interesting, the U.S. Supreme Court on the top of 173 outlined this very clearly. It said in one of its dictums, in one of its explanations actually, to the New York State Bar Association, it says, it is not the right of property which is protected, but the right to property. See where I am? Property per se has no rights. See, this pen has no rights. It's just a thing. But the individual, the man, has three great rights, equally sacred from arbitrary interference: the right to his life, the right to his liberty, and the right to his property. The three rights are so bound together as to be essentially one right. And then he says this: to give a man his life but deny him his liberty is to take from him all that makes life worth living. Do you agree with that? If you didn't have your liberty, would your life be enjoyable? Probably not. To give him his liberty, but take from him the property, which is the fruit and badge of his liberty, is to still leave him a slave. What do you think? That's the Supreme Court. Then one of our presidents, Abraham Lincoln, explained it this way. The next quote. He said, property is the fruit of labor. Property is desirable, is a positive good in the world. Then I love this next sentence because it indicates what his thinking was about in some governmental policies. He says this: that some should be rich shows that others, what? May become rich, and hence is just encouragement to industry and enterprise. What would Abraham Lincoln want in a society? Many what? Many rich people. To show what? To show everybody that they can rise to the same level. So he says, let him not who is houseless pull down the house of another, but let him work diligently to build one for himself, thus by example assuring that his own shall be safe from violence. I take it that it is best for all to leave each man free to acquire property as fast as he can. Some will get wealthy. I don't believe in a law to prevent a man from getting rich. It would do more harm than good. What would he most likely object to, given this philosophy? Some things we're doing today. Taking what? Taking from the haves and giving to the have-nots. Graduated income tax. See, Lincoln would be against that. You see this philosophy here? You leave their property and their right to their property sacred. And don't say that the property of the rich man is less sacred than the property of the poor man. You do that, why do you want to become rich? See that thinking?